The Guess Who began in 1958 when Chad Allen, a Winnipeg singer/guitarist, created Allen and the Silvertones, a local rock band. Randy Bachman on guitar, Jim Cale on bass, and Gary Peterson on drums formed Chad Allen The Reflections in 1962, which include future Guess Who mainstays Randy Bachman, Jim Cale, and Gary Peterson. In 1962, Canadian American Records issued their first single, Tribute to Buddy Holly. In 1963 to 1964, they signed with Quality Records and recorded several singles. Chad Allen and the Expressions in 1965. In January 1965, they released the garage rock album Shakin' All Over. The album's lead song, a rendition of Johnny Ken the Pirate's Shakin' All Over, was the band's first major hit, reaching number 1 in Canada and number 22 in the United States. As a PR ploy, their American company Quality Records credited the record to Guess Who, causing speculation that it was by a more well-known British invasion band working undercover. They released their second album, Hey Ho, What You Do to Me, in late 1965 with Guess Who displayed prominently on the cover. Keyboardist Bob Ashley left the band due to the rigors of touring. He was replaced by 18-year-old Burn Cummings. Just a few months later, Allen departed. He returned to college and then became a media personality with the CBC. This left Cummings as the sole lead singer. After Allen's departure in 1966, guitarist Bruce Decker, a former bandmate of Cummings, joined for several months. Richardson signed the Guess Who to his Nimbus 9 record label and production company in late 1968 and personally funded the recording of a new album. They were also contracted to RCA for international distribution. The band evolved from their garage rock roots to a more mature pop rock style influenced by soul and jazz. Wheatfield Soul was released in early 1969 and was a big hit in both Canada and the US. The single These Eyes charted in the top 10 in the United States and was certified gold with over 1 million copies sold. In September 1969, the follow-up album Canned Wheat was released with the double-sided hit song Laughing/Undone. The band's next album had more hard rock influences. In January 1970, American Woman was released, and it quickly became an international smash. It was their first album to enter the top 10 of the Canadian albums list and the top 10 of the American albums chart. The title tune was a huge hit in both nations, with the title track reaching number 1 in both. The Guess Who became the first Canadian band to have a number 1 single in the United States during the Billboard Hot 100 era as a result of this. In both Canada and the United States, No Time and No Sugar Tonight/New Mother Nature are charted at the top of the singles charts. In the early months of 1970, while American Woman was becoming a hit, Bachman recorded Axe, an all-instrumental solo album with Peterson on drums. The Guess Who started work on a follow-up to American Woman and finished 7 tracks. The tracks were kept under wraps until 1976, when they were published under the title The Way They Were. Due to illness, Bachman had to take a hiatus from touring with the Guess Who and was briefly replaced by American guitarist Bobby Sabalico. Bachman left the band in May 1970 after a farewell gig. His relationship with Cummings had deteriorated, and his recent conversion to Mormonism had caused him to be dissatisfied with the band's rock and roll lifestyle. Bachman went on to form Bachman Turner Overdrive, a popular hard rock band. The Guess Who replaced Bachman with 2 guitarists from the Winnipeg rock scene, Kurt Winter from the band Brother and Greg Lescue from the band Wild Rice, indicating a move into more complicated arrangements and vocal harmonies while going for album rock radio. Winter brought some songs from his former band and became a key songwriter for the Guess Who. Lescue sang lead vocals on occasion. The band was invited to perform for U.S. President Richard Nixon's family and visitors at the White House on July 17, 1970, but they were instructed not to play American Woman owing to its apparent criticism of the United States. The new lineup soon recorded Share the Land, which was released in late 1970 and became a major hit in both Canada and the United States. The album The Best of the Guess Who, which was released in both countries in 1971, was compiled from songs from the albums Wheatfield Soul through Share the Land. The band's financial fortunes and chart performance soon fell in the United States, possibly due to an inability to be taken seriously by album rock radio audiences, while they remained extremely popular in their native Canada. In mid-1971, they released So Long Bannatyne and Rockin' in early 1972. Both albums include more experimental and progressive themes. After a disagreement with Cummings, Lescue abruptly departed the band in the middle of a US tour shortly after the release of Rockin'. Donnie McDougal, a veteran of the Winnipeg rock scene who had most recently performed with the Vancouver-based Mother Tucker's Yellow Duck, filled in for Lescue on short notice. With McDougal on board, the band recorded the album live at the Paramount in May 1972 at Seattle's Paramount Theater. It was released in August and contained some songs that had not appeared on studio recordings at that time. Only 2 months after McDougal's arrival, original bassist Jim Cale departed the band. He later joined Scrubalo Kane, who had a few Canadian hit singles in the mid-1970s. The Guess Who replaced Cale with Bill Wallace, a member of Kurt Winter's early Winnipeg band Brother. Artificial Paradise was released in early 1973, and it reached number 10 in late 1973, and Road Food in early 1974 by this lineup. Road Food featured the track Clap for the Wolfmen, which was a big smash in both Canada and the US, and the band's first top 10 American record since 1970. The novelty song was written in honor of disc jockey Wolfman Jack, who contributed his voice to the album. In June 1974, guitarist Winter and McDougal were fired from the band for unspecified reasons. They were replaced by Dominique Troyano, a solo guitarist who had established the popular Canadian band Bush, and had previously played briefly with James Gang. Troyano was the first member of the Guess Who not to be born in Winnipeg, having grown up in Toronto. He had worked on an unfinished movie soundtrack with an older version of the Guess Who in 1970, as well as a Randy Bachman album, Axe, that year. Flavors was released in late 1974 by the lineup of Cummings, Troyano, Wallace, and Peterson, while Power in the Music was released in mid-1975 by the lineup of Cummings, Troyano, Wallace, and Peterson. These albums shifted towards jazz rock as a result of Troyano's compositional influence. Cummings was dissatisfied with the musical shift and dissolved the Guess Who in October 1975. Cummings and Peterson were the only members of the band who had served continuously since the band's golden era began in 1968. Cummings launched a successful solo career in 1976, releasing his debut solo album. The CBC approached the band about a reunion in November 1977. Burton Cummings was preoccupied with his solo career, and Randy Bachman had lately left the successful Bachman-Turner Overdrive with ambitions for his own solo career. Thus, neither was interested in resurrecting the Guess Who. Other four members such as Jim Cale, Gary Peterson, Kurt Winter, and Donnie McDougal responded enthusiastically and played one reunion concert, during which Bachman and Cummings granted permission to use the Guess Who moniker. Cale learned that the name had never been trademarked in Canada and bought it, using it to tour extensively on the nostalgia circuit with numerous revolving lineups named the Guess Who into the 2010s, sometimes with Peterson. Cummings and Bachman had been harsh critics of the Cale and Pearson incarnation of the band, dubbing them the phony Guess Who. The initial semi-permanent version of this lineup had Cale on bass, McDougal on guitar and vocals, and Kurt Winter on guitar, with new guitarist David Inglis and drummer Vance Masters joining them, another former member of Brother. In 1978, this group released the album Guess Who's Back to little fanfare. Winter then left music, and the surviving foursome released the album All This for a Song in 1979 to largely negative reviews. Other classic period Guess Who members reassembled many times over the years, the first being November 1979, when Burton Cummings, Randy Bachman, Gary Peterson, and late classic era bassist Bill Wallace regrouped for a CBC television special. This was followed by a brief tour of prominent Canadian cultural institutions in 1983, which resulted in the live CD Together Again, released in the United States as The Best of the Guess Who Live. Cummings and Bachman reunited in May 1997 for a disaster relief benefit hosted by Canadian actor Tom Jackson, as their city of Winnipeg was experiencing catastrophic flooding. Cummings, Bachman, Cale, and Pearson appeared together during the Pan American Games closing ceremonies at Winnipeg Stadium on August 8, 1999, at the request of Manitoba Premier Jean Chrétien. This sparked preparations for a reunion tour. However, Cale opted out due to health issues. Another combination comprising classic era members Cummings, Bachman, Peterson, Donnie McDougal, and Bill Wallace went on an extended reunion tour from 2000 to 2003. including performing at the Grey Cup halftime show in 2000. On July 30th, 2003, this lineup played in front of an estimated 450,000 people at the Molson Canadian Rocks for Toronto Stars charity event. The event was Canada's largest outdoor ticket event in history. Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings, unable to utilize the Guess Who moniker, have also toured and recorded as Bachman Cummings. Donnie McDougal was the sole remaining member of the band's golden era when Kell briefly departed from 1979 to 1981. Kell went on to lead floating lineups on nostalgic tours as the Guess Who, with a rotating cast of sidemen. Following additional personnel changes, an album named Liberty, headed by Kell and Peterson, was released in 1995 and was repackaged as Lonely One the following year. The nostalgic lineup had grown pretty solid by the late 1990s, with vocalist Carl Dixon serving for 13 years until he was forced to leave in 2008 due to a vehicle accident. From 1998 to 2000, Kell again took a break and was replaced by Streetheart bassist Ken Sinev, with Peterson being the lone classic era member. From 2000 until 2004, the Guess Who was on a hiatus, with Cummings and Bachman leading a separate reunion lineup. Kell and Peterson began traveling in 2004 with more rotating rosters of sidemen. Peterson has been the last surviving member of the Guess Who from the band's golden era since 2016. In 2018, the band led by Peterson released the album The Future Is What It Used to Be. Will Evankovich was replaced by Michael Starto, who used to play for Lou Gramm, as a guitarist in June 2021, after he departed to join Styx after producing their most recent albums. Rudy Sarzo departed the group in August 2021 to rejoin Quiet Riot. And that's what happened to the Guess Who. Let me know who you want me to do next. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.